Welcome, welcome, welcome to today's Givebutter webinar. As you all continue to roll in, we're going to play a little bit of music to get started, and we will in a couple of minutes. But while we wait, please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where are you zooming from and what good cause are you representing. We'd love to know. So where are you zooming from? What good cause are you representing today? Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you in 2 minutes. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you everybody for joining us today for Givebutter's webinar. I'm your host, Rachel Mills, streaming to you live from Kalamazoo, Michigan. And in today's special webinar, we have Emily Taylor here from teenyBIG, who's going to be talking about fundraising from ground zero, cost-effective ways to listen to your audiences. This is going to be incredible and unique, and we can't wait, Emily. Before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are going to finish right at 3 o'clock Eastern, and in between, Emily is just going to give us all we want and need to know about cost-effective ways to listen to audiences, as well as strategies to gain more supporters. This will be particularly helpful for you if you are fundraising from, like we said, ground zero. As always, we will send the slides and recording after today's webinar to you. At the end, we are going to use Q&A as always. And so if you want to make sure that Emily answers your question live, please be sure to use the Q&A feature. But as well, use the chat throughout. We love feedback and engaging with you. You know, in the Givebutter community, we are all about emojis and pun usage. And so please bring it to the chat with us today. Kate is here from Customer Success. Kate, thanks so much for your help today. She's here to answer any Givebutter specific questions that you might have. And if you are looking to get connected with our amazing panelists today, past panelists, past webinar attendees, our private Facebook group, Givebutter Fam, is filled with over 500 fundraising professionals. That would be a great place if you're looking to keep the conversation going after today's webinar or just want to get connected. So comment "I'm in the chat if you're already in that group. And if you're not, Kate is going to drop a link to that private Facebook group so that you can join. Like I said, I'm your host, Rachel, from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm representing Givebutter's marketing team. And since I was 16, I've been on a mission of helping others help others. incredible people just like you on today's call. I have been working with nonprofits for over a decade, serving with some really large nonprofits like United Way, World Vision, and more. I'm also a passionate mental health advocate and a limited licensed professional counselor. And I would love to connect with you after today's webinar. If we're not already connected, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you just search Rachel Mills CMP, you'll find me, or shoot me an email at rachel@givebutter.com. Speaking of Givebutter, if you are new to the Givebutter community, Givebutter is the world's leading free online fundraising platform designed to help you raise more, pay less, and give better. Givebutter. Yes, we get asked about this name a lot. Givebutter simply represents a better way to give. And some of my favorite parts about Givebutter, it's free, it's easy to use, Venmo fundraising, live stream, and most of all, I just think it's downright fun to use for the user and for supporters. So if you're curious to check it out, want to give it a try for free, simply go to givebutter.com to learn more. And of course, what you're all here for today, Emily Taylor. She is based in Chicago, Illinois. She's the principal of teenyBIG. She's passionate about helping nonprofits turn lackluster followers, we all have them, into enthusiastic supporters who we all want. Fun fact about Emily, she's helped design user-focused campaigns on everything from bicycle safety and arts advocacy to community chambers. I want to know more about that, Emily. Emily, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you to share with us, and I'm excited to listen and learn with all of you today from your incredible insight. Thank you so much for joining and sharing.
Sorry, just one moment. I have to, hold on. I have to adjust back to my beginning screen. One moment,
Good.
everybody. Okay. There we go. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me. As Rachel mentioned, my name is Emily Taylor from teenyBIG, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. But first, I want to hear about you. We're talking about fundraising from ground zero, and I want to know, how ground zero are you? How many years old is your nonprofit? Are you just starting out, or are you kind of just taking a new look at your fundraising? How many years have you been around? And I'd love to hear in the chat. All right, we got 10 years old. You guys have been around, had some experience. 86, wow. I think that beats everyone on at least age on the call. Okay, so we've got some experienced fundraisers out there. Oh my, 102, wonderful. So you guys aren't new to this. And I just wanted to kind of acknowledge and talk about some of the pain points that we share in fundraising, because it's difficult. It can be especially difficult as a new organization, but even if you've been around a while, fundraising and the tactics are always changing. And so it can sometimes feel like we're stuck when we're putting all this effort into engaging people, but we're not seeing the needle moving. And so we need some different tactics to really help us get unstuck. And then I also just wanted to acknowledge that this year is particularly challenging. 2020 was obviously a huge challenge for all of us. But in 2021, we're now dealing with things coming back and this new normal. And we really don't know what our audience is thinking, what they're comfortable with, what perspectives they've been having over the past year, and how we're then going to connect with them. And so it sort of feels like this void of this unknown moving forward, and it can be really just feel like a big obstacle as we work to connect with people. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and my background, because it really informs a lot of how I help support nonprofits. I started out very shy. I was always interested in helping and connecting with people, but I didn't always have the ways. I didn't, it didn't come naturally to me to do that. And so I had to learn step by step of how do I listen to people and hear the words that they're saying and understand what they're coming from, and use that to help explain, what I am thinking about and how to connect with them. And so I kind of had to do that in these broken out methods, but it really taught me how to learn it and share with others as well. Another big part of my background is I was in the for-profit world for a long time as a packaging designer. And in packaging, we think a lot about what's inside of a product and the experience someone has with buying and opening. You've heard about the unboxing experience of a product to share what's inside. And so I've taken a lot of those design research and human centered processes that we used in the design space and now use it to help nonprofits think about how they are unboxing for their followers. How are you um, letting them know what's inside in a way that helps them better understand your mission and the work that you do? So that brings me today. Um, I'm very passionate about helping nonprofits lift out of their expertise for a moment so that they can really find ways to connect with their followers. We'll talk a little bit about this, but as you get so good at what you do, it can be harder to connect with people who don't know a lot about the amazing work that you do. And so I help teams with that, and we work to engage audiences, listen to stakeholders, and just in general, be creative and thoughtful about the work that you do. As Rachel mentioned, I've done work for a lot of advocacy organizations, sustainability minded, arts and culture, as well as community organizations, because I really love helping nonprofits connect with the general audience. How can they really share their work and build momentum for it? So I want to just also talk about why donors matter. Um, you know, Donations, they give us unrestricted funds, which is really awesome. A lot of times, the funding that you can get from other sources can be limiting. And this last year we really saw why nonprofits need unrestricted funds. You don't always know what's coming around the corner, and you want to be able to solve your mission the best way you see fit. And those unrestricted funds that come from small donors can really help with that. But it also helps you identify who cares most about your mission. When you see people donating, even if it's a small amount, they care. They're not just following you on Facebook. They have taken a strong action, a bit of their hard earnings and shared it with your work. But it also can help us with larger funding and show others that you have a dedicated community. So there's this real sort of trifold of benefits that we get when we connect with people and help them take action for our mission. So I wanted to just hear a little bit about where are people getting stuck in engaging with you? Are there certain actions that you want people to take that they're not doing? What do you most want to see change? I'm going to pause for a minute, see if we get a few answers in the chat. Monthly donors. Yeah, and definitely getting sustained donors is a great way to build commitment, and have that lasting unrestricted funds. All right, working to get staff, very important, and really sometimes hard to get across. It's hard to get grants for staff donations, or for staff salaries, and so really thinking about different ways you can bring in funds to help support that. Peer-to-peer campaigns, also a really great way to allow your passionate supporters to connect with others and expand that work. So how can you get them to support? Because that's really like why we're all here, right? We're talking about donations. And so this is just a very loose model to look at. But you don't just get a follower and then ask for a donation. There really needs to be a process in place there. And so this is just an example where someone might follow you on social media, they find out about you, then they, like or comment or get involved in some way, and then support through a donation. So I'm just going to be using this as a reference as we talk about how do you engage people and stage things in a way that helps them really kind of come closer into your organization, become that passionate supporter that will really help move the needle for your organization. So as Rachel also mentioned, we're going to talk a lot about listening, and I find listening very important because it's how we know where our followers are at. If they're not engaged, why? And if they are engaged, what got them engaged, and what do they want to do further? So especially in thinking of 2021 and this year of these unknowns that we're heading into, in terms of how our audience will want to engage and what they want to do with us. We need to listen so that we can really understand where they're at and how do we meet them where they're at. So the first lesson in listening is how not to listen. And we think of the example of taking your car into a mechanic, and they talk a lot of lingo and tell you a bunch of shocks and boilers and parts that you might not necessarily know about, and now they're expecting this huge sum to fix it. And what we want to do is really avoid being the stereotypical auto mechanic and telling people about our mission in a way that is really confusing for them, or that doesn't make sense because they don't know the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of your work. So one of the ways that we do that and help explain it is try to figure out what people understand about our organization at each stage. So as people are starting to learn about your organization, does your mission make sense? Do they sort of need a little bits and pieces pulled off of it to really help them get it, and then slowly understand more and more the complex work that you do? And when you think about how much time you've spent learning about what it takes to meet your mission, it can make sense why people, your lackluster followers, or the people just loosely connected to you, might not really understand what it takes. So I've in the next slides, we have several ways you can cost effectively listen, because I want to make sure, sometimes listening can seem like these big expensive surveys that you do annually and assess them and analyze them. We don't need to always listen in a way that's time and cost, has high costs and costs a lot of your resources. So I'm going to go through a few of my favorite ways that you can listen: surveys, interviews, and A/B testing. So surveys are really great because you can answer questions like, how did people find out about you? You can have a few messaging options and see what's most appealing. They're really great for sort of a middle range of feedback. More than 25 people, you could probably do more than 500, but they're really in that sort of bigger email list range. And there's a lot of free tools out there to use with surveys. You can, SurveyMonkey, Typeform is paid for, but really easy to use. LinkedIn polls, video chat polls, Twitter polls, those are all forms of surveys. It doesn't have to be a 25 question survey. And in fact, I would recommend shorter surveys. Keep them short and frequent, because it's really a way to engage people and let them know that you're listening and care about their perspective, as well as get information that's valuable to you. It's not just about what zip code people are in. You can really start to learn what matters to them and why they care about your organization. So some of the pros with survey is you get to gain a little bit of insight into the why behind people's decisions. So how did they find out about you? Um, what messaging resonates with them, and you can see trends in different categories of people. So if you do ask a few age range questions or demographic questions, you can align information in a survey with those things so that you can help better target them, maybe start segmenting your lists to give them the information they want. Some of the cons with surveys is the need, you need to be careful of survey fatigue, and this is where long format surveying can be um, unengaging because someone really has to set aside a lot of their time. Even if it's a 15-20 minute survey, you're going to lose a lot of people in filling it out, and you need very engaged people. Where a, you know, 2 to 3 question survey, people can fill out pretty quickly. And one thing to really be cautious of with surveys is the difference between actual behavior and how people answer questions. And this is really my big caution with surveys is, um, you know, giving people options like, would you want to attend this event? Uh, what night of the week would you want it? Or if we gave you a free ticket, would you want to come to this event? People are going to be optimistic about their answers, and they might not actually, their behavior might not actually meet up with those things. So um, when you ask questions on a survey, you want to really keep in mind that it's not behavior. And so the more we can talk about preferences versus decisions, uh, the better off you're going to be with understanding some of the feedback. One of my favorite ways to listen to people is interviews, because here we can really get into the why. Why does an organization matter? Why does your organization matter to somebody? What's important about the programs that you have? What made them decide to donate? And you can really dig deep. So with interviews, talking to at least 5 people, but up to 25 or however many you have the time to talk to people, the more information you'll be able to get. So you can use tools just like we're doing now. You can do a Zoom, a video chat, call people on the phone, invite them for a coffee. You can, over the phone, you can record using Fireflies or Rev, or built-in recording software, so that you'll be able to go back and reference it and have a very natural conversation in the moment. But the trick here is to really ask a lot of whys. Why did someone donate to your organization, and really try to understand what information you gave them that got them there. And as you find patterns in talking to people, you're going to have more answers to what's going to bring in even more people, because you'll be able to understand what's resonating with people in that moment. So pros, it's really good to understand, like I said, the whys behind people's decisions, get more complex answers to your questions. And it's great for understanding people who are more engaged with your organization. You certainly can get people who are following you on social media, ask them if they're willing to do a 5-10 minute call with you. But it's really good for building stronger relationships and understanding the people that have already gotten to an engaged point with you, and figuring out how you can lead other people to where they've gotten. With surveys, you also have to be careful about not making assumptions based on a few responses. Um, and another watch out is just make sure, find people comfortable talking about, willing to be honest about the subject. I say that in particular if you're dealing with a touchy subject that you need to listen to people about. Perhaps you're really trying to engage people around a controversial topic. It might be good to have somebody outside of your organization conduct the interviews, so that they're not as worried about saying something that might be negative. And then lastly, A/B testing is also a really great way to listen to your audience. It might not seem initially like listening, but you're watching people's behaviors kind of behind the scenes and through technology. So it can help you figure out, what if you wanted to try two different elements of a campaign, and see what works best. You can try asking people for different amounts of money or see what gets the most attention. So this is really great for large amounts of followers, and you can do it through a variety of tools. Using your email is kind of the most obvious one. Mailchimp, using your CRM, but you can also do A/B testing through social media. Just do a different post each day of the week, and use the analytics tools to see which one got the most views, which one got you the most clicks, and use those learnings to then repeat for future posts or future messaging. The tip, though, is to only test one thing at a time so that the results are very clear. You wouldn't want to test one message and one graphic against another message and a different graphic, because aren't quite sure if it's the graphics or the messaging. But if you could keep it limited to one element, that'll really help you tell um, what's working for people. So A/B testing is great for understanding people at the early stages of your engagement ladder, because all they have to do is look at something or click. You don't really need to know. You don't really have to have a long engagement time with them. And it's really great for understanding how people will react in that scenario. So when I mentioned surveys and people not always being able to predict their behavior, it really helps you show how they will react versus how they think they will react. Um, and the cons is you don't understand the why behind people's reactions. You might know that they chose a certain message A over message B, but you won't really know why. You won't necessarily know if a word set them off, or one was more negative, or if it really turned out that the one that was chosen was more positive. So going back to these engagement stages that I posed here before, um, it's important that you listen at each stage, so that you can figure out where people are and how they're going to get to the next stage. And what I show here, kind of a lead up to a donation. There also might be events that you have in here. Um, but you want to be thinking about how engaged are people with your organization. It's not so much what they're doing, but how engaged are they? Are they kind of lurking and following you in a sense where they're not having to do much, they're just gathering information? Or are they endorsing? Are they coming to an event? Are they participating in some way? And then are they taking an action? Are they making a donation? Are they volunteering? And those are the things you want to look for, is that stage of engagement. So let's go through a little bit and talk about how you can listen at each stage. So how can you listen to your followers through some of the methods that I was just talking about? Um, you could check the pulse of your audience with some short, regular surveys on social media, such as, how'd you find out about us? Have you been to an in-person event this year? Which of these upcoming programs would you be most excited about? And this is where it can start to tie into, what goals do you have? What do you want to try in 2021? Are you looking to try an in-person event? Ask people what they've already done. What might they be looking forward to? And just, have a little Facebook survey, just something quick, so that you can get a pulse, but also start to see who's ready to move beyond that lurking following phase and really engage with you on social media. As I mentioned before, you can also check stats, what posts got the most engagements, what activities increased your following. Did you have an event and that really spiked things more than some other events? Do more of those. Just keep them up, see what works, and crank that up. Now to endorsing. So you have people that might be connecting and engaging just a little bit with your organization. They understand a bit about what you do. How can you listen and really try to figure out where they're at? So you want to listen to them because they're not donating, and you really want to find that missing piece of the puzzle of how to move them to that next stage. So you might regularly ask a few people who have engaged through social media to fill out a 3 to 4 question survey, or spend 5 minutes on the phone with you. You might not get everyone to respond, but getting talking to one person a week and trying to figure out what they understand about your work will be really valuable in understanding what information you need to be getting out through your email list, through your social media, through your events, so that people can really understand why your work is important. You can also run an A/B test to see if different messaging inspires a donation. So you have these list of slightly engaged people, try a few things on them and see if one of them gets more people to bite and make a donation. And then lastly, you know, how do you listen to your donors? This is, what a lot of us are, this is our goal here, is how can we increase those donors so we do have that unrestricted funds, we do have that following, we can show the number of donors that we have. We really want to understand how they got there. And so listening is really important so that we understand what we did to get them there, and how we can get others to do the same. So, similarly, ask a few people who have donated to, again, fill out a survey or spend 5 minutes on the phone with you, and ask them slightly different questions. Not so much how you would with the slightly engaged group. Ask them why they donated, what inspired them, what stories connected with them that you've told, and what do they think you'll do with that support? Do they really understand how that donation, you know, falls into all of your work? Do they feel like it's just a drop in the bucket, or do they feel like they can see their donation making a difference? And then you can also observe donors through your software. When you see where people donated, make sure you're following. Um, you know, did it happen after certain promotions? Where did it come from? Really see, again, view those behaviors from behind the scenes and make record of it. So that is really a lot of thoughts on listening and how we can use listening to better understand where our audience is at, so that we can now have an engagement strategy for moving them along. And so it's important to have an engagement strategy because it shows you where to go and what to do. And I say that, in the same way you create an outline before you might write a long paper, or make a grocery list before you go to the grocery store. When you have those outlines and that strategy for what you're doing, it is a lot easier to get the right groceries, to write a great paper, and you don't have to think as hard when you're in the moment. And so having that strategy is really important, not only for you and kind of clearing your mind when you're juggling all these different things that you have to do each day, but it also helps your team align. So when you have a strategy, your social media experts can work with your development directors, and your program managers, so that you're all leading people in the same direction and moving them towards those donations, and not just being focused on your specific task. So for instance, if you're planning an event, um, and you had a strategy for what you need to do and say to engage people at this event to move them towards a donation, you would know what to share on social media to get them excited and prep them for an ask. You'd know how much information you need to tell your audience at the event to better understand your work. And then you know what you need to do to ask them to do next. because it's one of those things that seem obvious, but it is, if you don't ask, you won't get those donations. And so sometimes we forget and we walk around it a bit, but we need to be clear and ask people. And so when your entire team is working together towards that, it can really be a lot smoother and make sense for the audience that's attending this event. Um, so let's talk about some strategies to gain supporters that involve, um, that can be based off an engagement strategy. And this is one of my number one mindset shifts that I ask of all my clients is to move from being an expert to a teacher. And what I mean about this is, you know, you're so good at what you do and your mission and why it's important and knowing what it's going to take to get there because you spend a lot of time on that. And everyone has their own expertise, whether it's a finance manager or a flautist. People are experts at the things that they do, and it can be hard to understand each other. So I want you to think about yourself when you are engaging your audience. Think about yourself as a teacher. And the reason I bring this guitar image up here is, if you imagine wanting to take guitar lessons, you don't just pick up the guitar and play some really complicated, um, you know, song. You need to learn the basics and build up. And so a good teacher is going to maybe hook you in at first with helping you learn pieces of your favorite Taylor Swift song. They're gonna give you something catchy and engaging, and then they're going to teach you how to do a few chords, and then they're going to keep bringing you along next, enticing you with some exciting piece that you can learn, but also giving you that information along the way until you do really understand the nuances of the music, the actions that you need to do in order to play them. And so this is how we can think about our own work, is that people are not going to instantly understand how important the work that you're doing is, or all the policy building you're doing behind the scenes. They need to start in little baby steps, and can guide them along the way. So that's really what we're after, is guiding people down a path. And if you look at this picture, I always envision those misty mountains are sort of the unknowns about your organization. They're those things that you're doing to actually make an impact of your mission, and you need to get people there before they're really going to understand. So in order to do that, we guide them down a path. And I'm just going to give you this little example to help illustrate that. So let's say you're going to a coffee shop, and this is transactional coffee shop. They keep things real simple, but they're very good coffee. And you order a cup of coffee. It's their special blend. It is delicious, and you'll see them next time. But now imagine going to guiding coffee shop. They're thinking a little bit more about how to guide you down a path. So when they give you a coffee, they also give you a punch card so that you can come back and earn a free coffee. And so that's something that's kind of gives you gives you something to hold on to, and a reason to come back. So you come back, and they also give you a sample of a pastry that they have, um, as well as telling you a little bit more about where their beans come from and the farmers that these coffees help support. And you get to learn about it. It feels really good to help support that. So next time you come back, and now you have on your mind that pastry you might have tried, that story, and now the barista mentions, you could also buy some of these beans and help support, these farmers even more. And it's this way of building, building information, building your understanding of the coffee, and also increasingly engaging you in different things that they offer. But here's the thing, you don't sell coffee, right? Um, you're not a for-profit business. But the lesson here is that you do sell social good. This is why people are donating. It's not a thing. It's the work that you're doing is the product. And so, your coffee card is the information that you're constantly giving people about how you're moving the needle or the struggles that you're having. Um, the story of the farmers is your stories of the impacts that you're making, and those coffee beans are the support that they're going to be giving, those donations that you're working, helping them understand why they need to do so, and help you move that needle. So the difference here, again, the difference between that transactional coffee shop and that guiding coffee shop is the guiding coffee shop is thinking about moving you from one spot to the next. And that is what I want you to be thinking about is, you know, it's not just a random game of getting, asking people randomly for donations. It's really thinking about how, why is someone following you, and what do they need to know and hear and be asked to guide them to that next stage. So, how are some ways you can start guiding people today? And I want to keep it simple again, so that these are things that you can start doing right away. Um, you might post a quiz on social media to help them learn something interesting about your organization. So, I often run into nonprofits where they're doing great work, but they're not always sharing some of these really interesting uh, things that they're learning along the way. The statistics behind why people might have increased in biking over the past year, or the way arts and culture organizations have been affected by COVID. Give people a little quiz, and help them know what's actually happening in those communities that they might not be connected to. Another idea is, at the end of an event, you have people who are engaged in your virtual or in-person event. You remind them of the work that you do, and before asking for a donation. So rather than, hey, you attended this great event, if you'd like to support, remind them that you're doing stuff behind the scenes. You're not just an event company. I've worked with some arts and culture organizations, and sometimes they throw these really amazing events, and they forget to remind people that they're doing work behind the scenes, supporting those artists, really getting them known, or helping incubate their careers, pull them out of poverty, whatever it might be. And people need to be reminded of that. They just had a great time, and but you're not just a regular event company. You are a nonprofit, and so you need to really let them know, and um, help them know where that donation is going, and guide them there with that information. And another way you can start guiding them is, run that A/B test, and see different ways you can move them towards a donation. So it might be asking in a few different ways, and sending out an email through a testing, or doing separate posts on social media that guide people to you know 3 different pages of your website, and see which one works best. You can do that through A/B testing, or if you're a little nervous, you can also ask some of your supporters, and have them walk through it, and give them their thoughts. So that really is what I have about helping you listen to your audience, and then using that information to guide them. I'll also be sending you a free paper on unlocking barriers to gaining passionate supporters. So I'll be sending that out to you in the next week, after Rachel sends out this presentation and the recording. But this is really going to be helpful for you to understand some of the functional, emotional, and cultural barriers that can keep people from engaging with your organization, as well as include a worksheet so you can work through it yourself. And then we can also see if you want to connect and get further tips and updates on turning your audience into passionate supporters. So with that, I'm going to say Thank you. And turn it back over to Rachel.
Hey, thanks, Emily. That was amazing. You have my gears turning. So we're going to kick off the live Q&A for the next 15 minutes here. So if you also have your gears turning and you're wondering, have some follow-up questions about some general things Emily shared, please add that to the Q&A feature. But you can also ask specific questions. So if you're running into a roadblock for your organization specifically, and you'd love Emily's expert advice, now's the time. So please add those to the Q&A. Looks like we have some love here from Robin. Great info. Thank you. As well as Tarni. Thank you both so much for that feedback. And while we wait for your questions in the Q&A, Emily, I'm just curious, as you see people, let's say, like start to take these first steps of listening to their audiences at these different stages, what are some of those roadblocks that you see? Like maybe they take the first step and then what? And then they're like, how do we keep listening? How do we manage all this like incredible data that we're getting? Do you have any feedback or support for them?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's really great to pull in this data, and I think creating an engagement map is a lot of the work that I do with organizations. So really using a path, however you want to visualize it, and figuring out, as I mentioned, what stage people are at. Are they lightly engaged? Are they just lurking? Are they doing something active, or are they actually donating and supporting? and and using those categories to really define where people are at there. So what do they understand, what inspires them, and what do you need to ask are usually the three categories that, as I gather data, I try to fill in that information for each of those stages.
Oh, I love that, kind of mapping it out. And what does that look like? Where do you do that?
I usually use the Google Suite. I like creating visual diagrams. So, and actually, maybe Rachel, what I'll do is when you send out your email, I have a worksheet that people can use to build
Oh, nice.
an engagement, just to get started in building an engagement map and thinking through those different stages. Um, so sometimes it's linear, sometimes it's depending how complex the engagement is. Sometimes it's at core, so people are on the outside, and as
Mhm.
they get closer in, that center is where you ultimately want to be taking them. And so, I personally work with trying to figure out the visual representation that best works, and aligns with the organization.
That is so fascinating and makes a lot of sense with your background.
Yeah, yeah. I do like visualizing it helps us all picture it in our
Yeah.
minds better than just writing it down.
Absolutely. Or just looking at a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers or reports.
Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't sink in that way.
hmm Um, Another question that I have, I'm wondering if you could share any success stories, like clients that you've worked with that you've helped rise up from ground zero and start listening effectively to their audiences. Do you have any success stories that come to mind?
Um, let's see if I can find a good one. I've worked with this one isn't from ground zero though. um,
Or wherever.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm thinking in particular, I worked with an organization that was actually having a lot of success with bringing in new followers, but really wanted to make sure they were moving people up, higher up in their engagements, and kind of being those longer term supporters. And when we listened to those longer term supporters, we realized that the message that was being successful in engaging a new audience was actually deterring those long-term supporters. So, they were having fun, lighthearted events with wine and cheese, and it felt to the longer term supporters that they were detracting from their mission. And so, what we did is we actually looked at creating two streams of information. So you had your general audience kind of hook events and messaging that went out there, but then also creating a sort of behind the scenes set of information and communication that went out to people that can met a certain criteria of engagement, and those people were able to like build a stronger relationships and with the organization and really feel like they were a part of it.
That is fascinating. And how long had that organization been around?
Oh, a while. They were, as
Oh,
I
wow,
mentioned, this,
okay.
yeah, this wasn't a new organization. Um,
But that's probably relatable to a lot of people on this call because in the beginning we saw so many of you, your organizations have been around so long, yet you feel like you're still at ground zero in so many ways. And so that's just really interesting.
yeah,
Looks,
I think.
oh,
Okay.
go ahead.
I was just say I do think that's important for the longer term organizations to be around is that you can't. It's going to be hard to build new support without and use the same message for your old audience, and so you do have to think about segmenting so that you can, you know, give people the right information that they need. And if people have been with you a while, they want to know the hardships that you're facing and how you're tackling those really complex problems that are ongoing.
Now more than ever. Yeah. Looks like Bev dropped a question in the chat. Looking for advice on how to bring the organization and to understand the importance of philanthropy in developing culture around it. Any messaging suggestions that you might have for Bev?
Let's see. So is this question kind of around like helping your audience better understand the importance of philanthropy? Just gonna go there unless you contradict me, Bev, because I know there is definitely a generational gap in how people think. Oh, internal and external. So, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question. Oh, maybe is it like building your team and understanding internally how how you can all work together to move people towards donations? Um, well, I'll talk a little bit about what I was mentioning before. Is, there's some generational gaps that we're seeing around philanthropy and how people are changing. Where it used to be nonprofits could just ask for donations, and um, people really trusted them and gave those donations as part of their annual giving. Um, but this is why I'm finding listening so important as generations, as we move through generations, people are more used to organizations, companies, for-profit companies, listening to them and really um, giving feedback and being more connected with some of those corporate decisions that people are used to being listened to. And so we're really finding this need to connect with people on a more personal level. And that's this idea of getting out of the expert zone and into this teacher zone, so that you're building a relationship and you're not just about directing and telling people. It's kind of instead of a top down approach, it's a bottom up approach, and really helping people participate, again, whether it's through surveys, giving people things to do other than just donate, being able to answer questions, being able to give comments that you might then put into a larger report. Those are the kind of things that people need beyond just being asked for donations to really feel like they're connecting. I don't know if I answered your question, Bev, but I wasn't quite sure if I understand it totally.
Well, that got me thinking, Emily, as you said that. Um, how can people balance like all the national or international research and data that's coming out about donors or potential donors with their own data and research and donor base. How do you balance the two trends?
That's really important, and I always try to remember that national and international data is a collective of a lot of different communities, and so you know you kind of have to judge how niche your community is, um, and that is where I think listening comes in and helps you tell who your community is and what they're thinking. Um, because as we're seeing right now in the news, people are thinking very differently depending on what state they're in, what news they follow, what where they're getting information. Is it Reddit? Is it Twitter? Are they completely customizing the news that they receive, um, and therefore have a very different perspective than someone who might be customizing in a different way? So I think it's always important to, read up and pay attention to national news and use it, but definitely prioritize the research that you do about your audience, because they might have different associations with the word support or sustainability or culture, and or equity. And so you really want to understand how they are interpreting what you're doing. Um, Unless you want a new audience, then if you're really trying to expand, it might be important to balance that with national data so that you can start to stretch the people that you're listening to and expand into a wider audience.
So good. Balance the two, but keep close your people and your research, what
Yeah,
you
you want
found.
to prioritize that.
Yeah, I love that. Any other words of encouragement or advice that you have for attendees today as they, start or continue their journey of listening to their audiences?
I would say, be I like to tell people to think like a scientist. So, as we have these unknowns and go out into the world, scientists are always trying to find answers to these big questions. Why is the sky blue? What's gravity? And so, when you think like a scientist, it's it's important to have to not make assumptions and have hypotheses. So, just as an example, I was working with a client who assumed that no one their campaign didn't do as well in this past year, and so they assumed people were more concerned about more the um, nonprofits that were out in the forefront and working with COVID and fighting some of those immediate needs in the community, and they were a museum. Um, but when I asked her on it, are you assuming that or do you know that? And she realized like she was making that assumption, and
Mm,
so that is something, you know, in a scientific way of thinking, then you'd want to test that. How can we test and see if people really had other priorities for donating, or if maybe we just didn't we didn't explain how hurt we were by COVID and how no one could come to our museum, and we're
yeah.
not getting other funding here. Like this, we could really use your support. And so going out and doing that listening and understanding where people were at, um, you know, helps add to our scientific data and change our assumptions into known facts.
Thanks for inviting us to put on some new hats today. Teacher, scientist, I love it. So good. Emily, for people who want to get in touch with you, we have your email here. Like I said, we're going to send the slide deck after so people can click your LinkedIn link here in your website. But if you want to go right away and learn more about Emily, even as we're chatting, type in teenyBIG.com. And we'll be in touch after today's webinar. We're going to send a quick survey to you right after you exit. If you could take 2 seconds to fill that out, that would be so helpful. We, Givebutter, would love your feedback after today. Thanks again for joining, Emily, for guiding and leading us through this really important topic of listening to our audiences. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks at our next webinar. That's going to be on corporate partnerships, social responsibility, with a exciting group of panelists. So hope to see you in the Facebook group afterward to keep the conversation going. Have a great Wednesday. And until we see you again, happy fundraising. Goodbye, everybody. everybody.
Bye. Thanks for coming.